Welcome to ZoomInData. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining this detailed session on custom handlers in Azure Functions. We will explain what custom handlers are, how they work, the request, response protocol, configuration details, debugging techniques, performance characteristics, language examples like Go and Rust, deployment steps, security considerations, monitoring, testing, and best practices for success. If you are preparing for certification, an interview, or building functions in languages not natively supported, this session will give you clear, ready-to-use knowledge. If you find it helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to ZoomInData for more Azure deep dives. Let us begin. What are custom handlers in Azure Functions? Custom handlers allow you to run Azure Functions using any programming language or runtime that is not natively supported by Azure Functions. They act as a flexible bridge between the Functions host and your custom code written in languages like Go, Rust, or others. With custom handlers, you can build functions in virtually any ecosystem while still benefiting from Azure Functions triggers, bindings, and scaling. How do custom handlers work? The Azure Functions host receives a trigger event and forwards it as an HTTP POST request to your custom handler. Your handler runs as a lightweight HTTP server, processes the incoming request, and returns a structured JSON response. The host then takes your response and translates it back into the appropriate function output or HTTP reply. Explain the request, response protocol. The request is an HTTP post sent to your handler endpoint with a JSON body that contains trigger metadata and input data. The response must be valid JSON with an outputs object for binding results and an optional logs array for custom log messages. Return HTTP status 200 for success. Any other status code will cause the function invocation to be marked as failed. What languages support custom handlers? Custom handlers support any language or runtime that can start an HTTP server and handle JSON over HTTP. Popular choices include Go, Rust, Python, Java, Ruby, PHP, C++, and even shell scripts or Node.js. There is no official SDK required. You simply implement a simple HTTP endpoint. How do you configure custom handlers? Configuration is done in the host JSON file by adding a custom handler section. You specify the default executable path and optional startup arguments. Example configuration: custom handler, description, default executable path, my handler, arguments. The host automatically launches your handler process when the function app starts. Explain the exec file in custom handlers. The exec file is the actual binary or script that implements your custom handler logic. It can be named anything: handler.x, main, app, or my handler, and must be included in your deployment package. The file must listen on the port provided by the functions _custom handler _port environment variable. The host starts this process and communicates with it over localhost HTTP. How do you handle triggers in custom handlers? Triggers arrive as HTTP POST requests containing trigger-specific metadata and input data in JSON format. Your handler passes the request body to understand the event type and payload. After processing, you return the results in the outputs section of the JSON response. The host takes care of executing any configured output bindings based on your response. What is the role of handler.x? Handler.x is the common name for the executable file that runs your custom handler logic. It is the process the Azure Functions host launches and communicates with over HTTP. The host passes the correct port and forwards all trigger events to this process. If the process crashes, the host automatically restarts it. How do you debug custom handlers? Run your handler locally as a standalone HTTP server on a fixed port. Use tools like curl or Postman to send sample trigger JSON payloads to your local endpoint. Attach your language-specific debugger, VS Code, Golang, GDB, to the running process. Check the functions host logs in the Azure portal for startup or communication errors. Explain performance of custom handlers. Custom handlers generally have slightly higher cold start times compared to natively supported runtimes. Languages like Go and Rust offer very fast startup, usually under 1 second. Once the handler is warm, execution performance is comparable to native runtimes. Use the premium plan to eliminate cold starts for latency-sensitive applications. How do you implement HTTP in custom handlers? Your handler must listen on the port provided by the functions _custom handler _port environment variable. Handle incoming post requests to the invoke function name endpoint. Pass the JSON request body and return a valid JSON response with outputs. Always return HTTP status 200 for successful processing. What is the startup time for custom handlers? Startup time depends heavily on the language and binary size. Go and Rust compiled binaries usually start in under 1 second. Interpreted languages like Python or Java may take several seconds due to runtime initialization. Use Premium Plan to keep instances warm and avoid cold starts. How do you handle bindings in custom handlers? Bindings are defined in function JSON. The host manages input and output binding execution. Input data from bindings arrives in the request JSON payload. You return output values in the Outputs section of your JSON response. The host translates your response into actual binding actions. Explain limitations of custom handlers. There is no official functions SDK. You must implement the HTTP protocol manually. Cold starts can be longer than native runtimes depending on the language. Debugging in the portal is limited. No language-specific tools are available. Some advanced features, such as full durable function support, may not be fully compatible. How do you deploy custom handlers? Include your compiled executable or script in the deployment package, zip or run from package. Configure the custom handler section in host JSON with the executable path. Deploy using standard methods, Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, or VS Code. The functions host automatically starts your handler when the app starts. What is the role of host JSON in custom handlers? Host JSON is the primary configuration file for custom handlers. It defines the executable path, startup arguments, and port behavior. It also controls concurrency, logging levels, and other runtime settings. Correct host JSON configuration is required for the handler to start properly. How do you use Go with custom handlers? Write a simple Go HTTP server that listens on the functions _custom handler _port. Pass incoming post JSON and return the correct JSON response format. Compile the Go code to a native binary using Go build. It starts very quickly. Deploy the binary in your function app package. Explain Rust custom handler example. Use Rust with a web framework like Axum or Actix Web to create an HTTP server. Listen on the port from the functions _custom handler _port environment variable. Handle post, invoke, function name, requests with JSON parsing and response. Compile to a native binary. Rust offers excellent startup time and low memory usage. How do you handle streaming in custom handlers? Streaming is not natively supported. You must return a complete response at once. For large responses, stream data to blob storage and return a reference or URL. Use chunked transfer encoding if your handler framework supports it. The function's host expects a full JSON response. Partial streaming is not possible. What is the future of custom handlers? Custom handlers will continue to be supported for languages not natively covered. Microsoft focuses on improving native runtimes for best performance. Future updates may include better debugging tools and portal integration. Go and Rust handlers will remain popular for low latency, high performance use cases. How do you secure custom handlers? Use managed identities for all outbound calls to Azure services. Avoid secrets in code. Enable HTTPS only and private endpoints for the function app. Restrict inbound traffic using access restrictions or VNet integration. Validate and authenticate incoming requests in your handler code. Explain logging in custom handlers. Write logs to stdout or stderr. The function's host captures them as traces. In Go or Rust, use standard log or tracing libraries for structured output. Logs appear in Application Insights or Logstream when enabled. Include correlation IDs to trace requests across handler and host. How do you monitor custom handlers? Enable Application Insights to collect request, dependency, and trace telemetry. Monitor handler startup time and errors in the runtime logs. Use Azure Monitor metrics for invocation count, duration, and failures. Set alerts for high latency or repeated startup failures. How do you test custom handlers? Run your handler locally as a standalone HTTP server on a fixed port. Test with curl or Postman by sending sample trigger JSON payloads. Verify the response JSON matches the expected format. Deploy to a staging environment and test with real triggers. Best practices for custom handlers. Choose fast starting languages like Go or Rust for better cold start performance. Implement the response protocol accurately and test it thoroughly. Use managed identities for Azure Service Access. Never store secrets. Enable Application Insights for monitoring and debugging. Keep handler startup fast. Avoid heavy initialization or large dependencies. Combine with Premium plan to eliminate cold starts in production. Document your handler protocol clearly for team maintenance. Thank you for watching this complete guide to custom handlers in Azure Functions. From setup and protocol to Go, Rust examples, security, and best practices. If this session helped you with certifications, interviews, or building functions in any language, please like, share, and subscribe to ZoomInData. More Azure deep dives are coming soon. Stay connected and keep learning. Thank you. See you in the next video.